Great. I want to welcome us to the light board for May 5th. I guess the first order of business is to go over future meetings. So we have on the agenda a meeting for May 24th. I am going to cancel that just because I think everyone needs a little time to catch up on our pace of meetings and kind of get things back in order now that town meeting is done and so forth. So I'm going to remove that one from the schedule. And I've heard that Dave is going to be away for June 28th. So I think we should also cancel that meeting as well. So June 28th and May 24th, I'm removing as future meeting times. But we will look at July and adding a meeting there if the workload requires it. So the next thing is to discuss minutes, and I believe there was a December 14th minutes have been shared with the board. Does anyone want to discuss those minutes? Is there any changes?
No, fine.
Okay. Could I request a motion for the December 14th, 2022 minutes?
I make a motion that we approve the December 14th minutes as last distributed by PM.
Excellent. And a second?
Second.
A second. Great. Warren. Oh, you're muted, so give me a thumbs up.
Approve.
Oh, great. Wendy?
Approve.
Alice?
I do too.
And I agree as well. So we have approved the December 14th minutes. Next is the roles of the light board. So there's three topics I wanted to discuss. Town meeting has just passed. Article 21, the middle school solar, passed, and one of the comments not discussed in the previous meetings that came up from some of the high school students I presented to was about the color of the canopy stands. So those big steel structures, they asked if those could be painted crimson, the school color, because I've seen the Lincoln Sudbury, which has gray and it's kind of draconian and very, infrastructure looking. And I've seen the Carlisle canopy, and it has blue for its steel structures. So they've requested crimson, and I think it would be a good aesthetic choice. But I just want to mention it in one of our meetings that was a request.
Yeah, and Brian, we can add that in, as I said earlier, on the bid as an add alternate to see what the cost would be, to see if it would stay in budget.
That'd be great. Excellent. And next is election of officers. So after town meeting, we elect a chair. And Wendy is leaving. We're going to have two new members because Pam is also leaving. Warren would be the logical choice. I've asked Warren, and why don't you go ahead, Warren? Do you feel ready to?
Yeah, I do not feel, I would be happy to be board chair in the future, but I haven't been on the board very long, so I would prefer not to do it at the moment. And I also have quite a lot of work obligations in the coming months, so this is not a good time for me, and I'd like to put it off.
Okay.
What about clerk? Because you need a clerk also, right?
Yes.
Right.
Well,
Yep.
I figured we'd do chair first, clerk, and then audit. So we have plenty of roles to fill. And so Alice, I'm willing to be chair, but
Great.
Good deal.
All right. So apparently, Alice is fine continuing to be chair. There was no-
But I'm only a vote of one. There are various esteemed colleagues who may have a differing opinion.
I can make a motion, but do you want to do the whole slate, Brian?
Well, let's start with that. Well, if you could do a motion, Wendy.
I'd like to make a motion that Alice become our new chair of the Concord
No.
Municipal
No,
Light
no,
Board.
That was great, Wendy. So I think Alice would prefer I be chair.
Oh, all right. I thought Alice was. All right. No? Okay, I
I've been
make
there,
a
done
motion.
that.
Okay, I can make a motion that Brian continue to be chair of the municipal light board for the next fiscal year.
Excellent. And a second,
Second,
and Wendy,
Approve.
Warren,
Approve.
Alice,
yes.
and I agree as well. Well, thank you. So next is clerk. So I need a volunteer to be clerk, and the logical choice, given the situation, would be Warren, because usually clerk precedes becoming chair, and you have aspirations to be chair in the future.
Well, I would be happy to be clerk. And with no guarantee that that necessarily means that I would necessarily become chair next.
Okay, that's fair enough. Just
And
take.
can I
clerk
make
role.
one comment on the clerk? I
Yeah.
know we have this backlog of minutes, which is an issue, and I don't want to get into raising that each time. But I think one partial solution would be to make the minutes about half as long as they are. The minutes are always very, very good, very detailed, but maybe they could be produced more easily if we weren't trying to be quite so thorough.
Yeah, so every clerk has a different way of approaching minutes, and you will be able to put your spin on it.
I think he's ready to be chair, I can tell.
Yeah.
These are executive comments that I wholeheartedly understand.
Hey,
having been
Brian,
chair.
can I just add 2 cents on that? So
Yeah.
what would make the minutes really efficient is at the close of each agenda item, we recap the salient recommendations or issues or decisions, right?
And
Because then
I-
it's just easy to transcribe them. Right.
Yeah, I try to do that. I try to do that at the end of each agenda
Yeah,
topic.
yeah.
But it's easier said than done.
Yeah, if we're more religious, to Warren's point, it's just faster, and then,
Yeah.
Karen can get them done faster, that's all.
Excellent. And Dave, I know you have a comment about past minutes.
Yeah, so we have a few minutes that are, behind, and we're using a consultant that the townhouse has used to get the minutes caught up. So
Great.
those the plan is to get all those caught up. Now, we're working on the first set with them right now, and I expect the first set's gonna take longer than, the remaining, once they get that all figured out. So we should be getting caught up here, hopefully soon.
Great. And
That's great.
yeah, it looks like we have only 6 sets of minutes from 2023 that are
Only.
only.
Only,
Well,
jeez.
my original assessment was 12, but the 2022 ones are caught up. They're just not posted. So we're going to find them and post them. All right. So we need a motion for Warren to become clerk. Wendy,
I make a motion that Warren be appointed clerk of the Municipal Light Board for the next fiscal year.
great. And Alice, do you mind giving me a second?
Oh, I would second that.
Great. Thank you. Alice,
Yes.
Wendy,
Approve.
Warren.
Yes,
The hesitation in your voice was.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Warren. I also agree. So Warren will be the clerk. Now, the Financial Audit Committee liaison is another position that this board needs to have filled as a role. Wendy is leaving, Warren is clerk, I'm chair. Alice.
So, well, actually, you know what, Brian, can I make a
Yes.
recommendation that
Yeah.
you figure out who's joining the board? Because what you really want is continuity on that committee. And if the next board member joins, they'll be here for 6 years in
Okay.
concept, right? Having the continuity on that committee is important, right? So not that Alice wouldn't be a great member, but
Mhm.
she's not going to be long in this committee, and then it's going to turn over again. So
Yeah.
you might want to wait
Okay.
and make that an opportunity
And-
for your new board person. And by the way, the April meeting was, I guess, canceled because people, somebody else wasn't able to come. So, and they have yet to schedule the next meeting. So
all
just
right.
FYI. So you can have a little time. You can buy some time, put it that way.
So Alice has a reprieve.
I would strongly suggest that you new member become
Okay.
that person. It takes a little while to get up to speed, and Jason could probably give a little sidebar on the finances as
Okay.
a one-on-one lesson too.
Well, I'll take your advice and we'll wait until our next meeting in June to look at that. And I'm meeting with Carrie later today to talk about new members, and we'll see where we are in June. Okay, so I think that's all the chair's updates. Thank you very much. And Dave, do you want to do your director's update?
Jason.
Sure.
Great.
So, since the last director's update, we have awarded the tree trimming, bid to Marquee Tree, in the amount of $315,000. They've gotten well underway. They're doing a great job, and they're making some significant progress. They started with, some of the main roads in the area that they, that we identified that we want to trim. So Monument Street, Lowell Road, and this week they're working on Barrett's Mill. So it's going great. They did ask for an extension in the time, which we were going to authorize through a change order. And the reason for that is project was delayed by about a month because of the bidding process, where we had to rebid it due to an internal error on the prevailing wage sheets. So it's a no-cost change order, and it's just going to add 31 days. So that is being processed now. The project should be completed by the end of May, which is great. So once they finish Barrett's Mill, they'll start working on the adjacent roads, off of Lowell and off of Monument and that sort of thing. So, so far, very positive. Only gotten, I think, 1 or 2 complaints, which is pretty normal when we tree trim. But so far so good. Something that's on our radar, and we've been trying to get a contractor to replace the roof at Station 219. That building was constructed in 1992, so the roof's over 30 years old. The challenge we're having is, it's a substation, and there's high voltage lines behind. And so we're coming up with a crafty way to get people in there where we'll transfer load off of one side so they can roof half of it and then transfer load to the other transformer and they can finish the back. It's a pretty straightforward roofing project. It should be quick in and out. But finding a contractor that's willing to do it is going to be a little more of a challenge. But we'll get it done. We're not the only entity that has substations with roofs on them. So the AMS project, I previously mentioned that the gateways had arrived. Staff pre-wired all the gateways. We did some engineering to figure out how we would get the ONTs in there securely, and we came up with a good way. The crews are now installing the gateways in the field. And so what that consists of is the line crews hanging them, wiring them. And then the fiber technicians will go out and install the ONTs and the splice gates, and then they'll be ready to be provisioned. With that, Eaton is scheduled to be out here next week. And they will, start provisioning the gateways and train the staff on how to do that. So once they do that, then we'll install the first meter, make sure the system's communicating properly. The information's coming back to the servers and all that. So getting ready to take a big step in the process. We did receive the first shipment of 80 meters. And so that was at the end of April, the beginning of May, it was recently. And the first big shipment of residential meters they got shipped on the 8th. So they're supposed to be in by Friday. So then we'll, get ready and execute the deployment plan. So it's getting ready to start. We also did send out an AMS benefits mailer. So you should see that coming through soon. And then the last thing I have is on power supply. You might recall in the portfolio, Commonwealth, New Bedford Energy Landfill. That contract is set to expire. They reached out to the participants to see interest in amending the price and moving forward. We really felt that the price was significantly higher than it needed to be. And as note, it doesn't have renewable energy credits. So for us to take that, we'd have to purchase credits to offset that. And so with the price of it and buying RECs, you'd be upwards of, $100 a megawatt hour range, which is high for that. And, we can get other projects, and we're working on other projects that are green, and, I would think it's more beneficial for us to do that. So it's also worth noting that the forward market price is around $70. So you'd be, $30 over that all in. So we weren't the only ones that let Energy New England know that we're not interested in extending that contract, and we want to continue to move forward with the other green projects that are in the slate.
Thank you. Yeah, that's surprising that an existing project would raise their price that high for an extension. It's usually the opposite. Usually they have an existing project and they've paid down their capital and they just want to sell more from the same,
Yeah, and I mean, when we extended that contract in August of 2018, that was at $40.35 a megawatt hour.
So they're 2.5 times that price is what they're requesting. I mean,
When
that's,
you factor in the RECs, yes.
yeah. Wow. All
Crazy.
right. Well, that's logical to pass on that. I do like the idea of using that landfill gas is, it's going to go up in the atmosphere anyway, might as well make it do some work. But that's too expensive. All right. Any questions from the board about Dave's update? Seeing none, Jason, are you ready to give your update?
I am, thank you.
Great, thank you.
I'll just follow up on what Dave mentioned about the advanced metering project. Our team has been working on that for several weeks now, and they'll be doing the splicing this week for the gateways, but there's been a lot of preparation that goes into that in establishing the separate secure network that these gateways will communicate on, how they will integrate into the vendor's cloud hosted platform. And we kind of serve as that conduit, but we want to make sure that it's protected and secure and isolated from all of our other networks that we maintain. So everything's looking good for when Eaton comes on site to do a test with the gateways that we're getting up now. So really looking forward to moving into that next phase. I wanted to mention the Affordable Connectivity Program, where we are on that. We've had some meetings on that. Again, the program is live for people. They can begin the application process today. We've been holding off on executing our communication plan until we get everything prepared. What we found is that there's a lot of reporting that's mandated for this on our end, and it's unique from all of the other data and reports that we have. And so we need to establish new workflows and figure out which person on which team is going to be producing this data and submitting it through a portal. USAID or USAID is the third party that the FCC uses to sort of track this data and administer this program. So we've been working with them. We've been working with NISC, the vendor for our billing software, and learning that, as I mentioned a long time ago, there are hurdles with this. We think it's a huge value to our customers who are eligible, but there is a lot of work that goes into it, so much so that some people end up just eating the cost because the time and labor required to do the program for a handful of customers isn't worth it. We're optimistic that once we automate this as much as possible, that it's not going to be a huge burden, but that's what we're working on now. And so once we feel comfortable that we know who is doing what, that we can comply with what we have to do when customers enter into the program, then we will initiate the communication plan to get everything out. And I thank Carol and her entire team for the time they've taken to learn how to work with this, how to coach customers and where to go, and then all the work involved in the billing software. So I'm excited that hopefully at our next update, we can let you know that that's all working smoothly. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that we have been deploying some of the same type of equipment for quite a while in customer homes, and it's still brand new equipment that we're buying, but there is a newer generation of equipment, and it's very different from the current generation in terms of what it can offer. And so we've been working with the vendor Calix that makes all of our ONTs and our switching equipment to get demo units of this so that we can understand it internally and have a handle on it, and then figure out what services that we might want to offer to customers. As you know, if you go to Comcast, you have a lot of options in addition to just getting internet. You can have security services, parental controls, more control of your device on what ports you open or how you administer it, other security system integrations. And so all of these things are possible with the newer generation of Calix equipment, and we want to be able to offer some of those services to our customers. And so we've been involved in a lot of on-site demos, and now we have the units in hand, and we're testing those internally to see what makes sense. There is, of course, as with everything now, you hear about cars where you have a monthly fee to unlock some sort of feature. Everything is now a subscription, and so along with all of these tools, comes a monthly cost. And so we're evaluating how we can offer these things at as low a cost as possible to our customers, and give them the features that they could get at other ISPs. So I'm just excited that we'll soon be able to announce some of these new products, and for at least for a while, customers can certainly choose. But what we're finding is that a lot of homes in Concord cannot have just a single ONT for wireless. So that means that the customer has to purchase their own equipment, set up a new mesh network. This newer line of hardware has a much broader reach and faster speeds. So it's on par with sort of the highest consumer quality equipment you can buy. So I think that it's going to make a huge difference just for the average user, even if they don't have any additional services, just in getting better coverage without having to do anything on their own when they become a customer. So and that's all I had.
Great. As someone who has a wireless router and 4 repeaters in my house, yeah, I get it. I have a unique problem. I basically have a Faraday cage as a house, and so if I need my garage, I need my shed, I need upstairs and whatnot. Yeah, so much appreciated with that new technology. Any questions from the board?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, and the administrative cost of that program, that federal program, sounds pretty high, and I'm happy to hear you're trying to automate that, but please keep us updated, because sometimes it might be less money for us to just provide those subsidies to the customers than it would be to go through all that expense of.
Right. Yeah, we'll understand exactly what it entails, and then we'll work with Dave and Carol and everybody to figure out the best course of action. We certainly don't want to, create additional costs just to get the, less of a benefit. So we'll keep it posted.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see, we are running about 10 minutes ahead of schedule. This is great. So the next on our agenda is a quick discussion. Well, we have 40 minutes assigned to this, but we have a board discussion about time of use and net metering. And this is the idea that within our time of use structure, that we will have credits for energy coming to Concord Light and charges for energy going to customers. And the proposed way of doing net metering is that variable distribution would never become a credit. It would just be a charge. So a solar customer would get credited for the average generation and the average capacity and transmission, or the peak expenses, those pass-through costs. So this is a change because we are able to offer hourly pricing, and we have meters that allow us to have insight into customer production and so forth. So when the original net metering for residents was created, it was based on this flat rate structure, meaning that there's the same price for all hours of the day. And we weren't able to credit based on how much energy was being provided to the distribution system during peak hours, because we just simply didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the meter technology. So I wanted to discuss with the board this change in approach. This is for scoping with cost of service study that we're going to do and rate design that we're going to do in the future. So it's not a vote to change our current net metering rate. It's just discussion about this concept. Any immediate questions from the board? Do you want more explanation on any particular components to this concept? Yes, Alice.
So my question, I guess my question is a procedural one.
Mhm.
We have a lot going on with the installation and startup of our new net metering system. Is there a reason that we need to discuss it now? I'm feeling like this is not the most pressing issue before us as we're getting ready to deploy the entire net metering system and getting our hands around
Yeah.
how we manage it and what the data coming in is looking like, and our facility to which we can respond.
So this is part of our time of use rate design discussions. So there was a memo sent out by staff that talked about the 6 areas of concern, and this is one of those areas of concern, which was how was net metering going to be handled under a time of use structure, because it can't be handled in a similar way as it is under the flat rate today. And we're looking to create a time of use rate that's based on expenses, such that each of these time periods reflects the cost to deliver power during those time periods.
I get the concept. I certainly know what that, I understand that pretty well. I was just wondering whether right now, before we even get our first meters installed, whether this is the time to think about. And
Well,
fine.
we want to pilot this time of use rate structure. So we need to be able to accommodate solar, because we have quite a lot of residential solar customers.
But do we have to get the time of use rate designed first?
Well, that
Right.
was
Right.
we had discussions about that time of use rate. It has been a few months since we had the original
Right.
discussion, and we've been following up on the memos clarification areas.
Right.
So that's what we're continuing. So here, Dave, do you mind if I share my screen?
Yep, just give me a second.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. So this is the mock-up that I did for that presentation about a time of use rate structure. Now, this is just concept, not actuals, because we need a cost of service study to do actuals, which is what we're preparing for. But you see here that we have the blue is distribution, the green is energy, and this is the capacity and the transmission. And so we have our on-peak time, our capacity, and our off-peak time. And then down here, we have every kilowatt hour has a distribution fee that's variable. So the concept is that we would credit solar customers if they generate electricity in the morning, we would just credit them the average cost of generation. And if they're generating power during the, 5, 6, or 7 o'clock hour, we would credit them the capacity and transmission, because remember, we're charging their neighbor for capacity and transmission as they're consuming. So it's not cost additive. Any other thoughts on this? I wanted to have a discussion about net metering because we're currently under a flat rate structure. And yes, Laura.
So I don't want to set expectations with this graphic because I think it could be misleading.
How so?
So for example, the representation of energy as a flat number, I think is not accurate. If
Well,
I
this would-
share my screen for a minute.
Sure. Well, also, I want to mention that, this is the time of use rate structure. This isn't the prices. This isn't here. How do I stop sharing? I can't.
No, you're sharing.
I'm trying to stop sharing. but
Oh,
My button isn't here. Thank you,
Yep.
Dave.
Okay, so now I need to,
But yes, this is the rate, not the cost.
okay, so this, I was just looking at California's new net metering tariff, which took effect April 15th, I believe, this year. And this is a graph. Can you see this graph?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's not, that needs to be. See, these are prices. So that's a penny, 2 cents, 3 cents, 4 cents. This is what their export credit is for solar on their solar net metering tariff throughout the day. These are the hours 1 through 24. So you can see energy is definitely not a flat value. It is in California, got a very low value during just the hours that solar is exporting heavily. And a much
Yes, but-
higher value during the evening peak and even during the on peak.
Which this reflects their expenses, not our expenses. So they are exporting to other states during those hours.
Well, what I'm saying is that the price of energy varies throughout the day. And yes, the ISO New England would have a different chart than this. As we bring more and more solar into the grid in New England, I believe our rate profile, our price profile will trend toward looking more like California. It's not quite this extreme today, but we definitely already see this ductwork. So anyway, my point was not to get you hooked on California, but simply to say that, that I don't want you to get used to the energy being a flat value.
Well, so that's a good question to discuss because we are charging customers a flat value. And when customers are exporting to their neighbors, that neighbor is paying that flat value. But yet the energy is being supplied by the neighbor. So the solar customer. So why are we not providing a credit based on the rate that we're charging? Why are we treating solar energy from a customer at a free market rate while we're charging them the fees at an average rate?
So the basis for the flat rate today is embedded in a couple of things. One, we don't have the metering technology to know what people are using and exporting. Well, what average people are using during the day by hour, right? That's why we're going to time of use, because we don't have that granularity currently. Secondly, the current net metering rate is a very different rate construct
Yep.
than any of our other rates, and it was born out of a very contentious
Yep.
discussion a number of years ago. And it was the rate that was finally settled on, but it bears no resemblance whatsoever to actual cost of service.
Right. There isn't a resemblance to cost of service. And those hard discussions that happened in 2012 and 2013 ended in a rate that actually credited customers for avoided capacity and transmission. And when 2 board members left and we had 2 new board members, Hugh, the chair at the time, pushed through a change to remove that because the reason given was we don't have the meter technology to be able to execute it. We do now. This is why we're discussing this. So the value of avoided capacity and transmission expense. I mean, these solar customers are putting up the capital to produce this power to push it back, and they're not getting credit for going to zero when they're covering their own need. They're getting credit only when they're reducing their neighbor's need for capacity and transmission fees. So why are they not? They're not receiving any value for that today. So that's what we're discussing is, should they receive that value? Wendy.
So I guess I would appreciate learning more about the marketplace and the best practice for net metering. I know you have some opinions about this, but I feel like we should, as a board member, understand the marketplace better and what those options are, and understand why there's differences and what's behind them. I'm not opposed to this necessarily. I just feel like the perspective would be important for just discussing and thinking through these
Sure.
rates.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
well, this is part of the point of an expense-based time of use rate is to accurately price energy. I mean, we could do real-time pricing, which would be every hour has a different price based on the market. But that's too confusing to customers. So we've gone to a 3-tiered time of use structure. Now, why would we then say, well, ETS gets special treatment because their load is at a special hour and we can define that as a special market decision. And then solar has the same on the other end, where we're going to go to the market and we're going to walk away from this expense-based, tiered system that we've just chosen. Why does the customer bear those responsibilities? Why wouldn't we just create a time of use rate that prices things every hour and then charges and credits based on that? Warren.
Yeah, I think I'm in your camp on this, Brian, in terms of, we have to get to the point of working out all the details, but the general point is we're moving towards time of use rate. We should have a similar rate structure for folks who have solar as for other customers of the light plant. Exactly how we move to time of use rates, and there may be some variation we want to put in there to reflect energy costs or something else, but the general concept of bringing solar production into the time of use system that we're moving to seems right to me.
Great. Laura.
So Brian, you were asking about why we were making a difference between a cost-based time of use and a market view.
Mm-hmm.
And those aren't two different things. Those are the same thing. Our cost is the market because we leave 20% of our position open. So the incremental cost, if someone buys an EV and we have to supply more kilowatt hours for that EV, it's coming from the market. And so we view our cost of that, right, as being the marginal cost of the market.
So the difference is we have created an expense-based rate, and and we've averaged the generation cost across all the hours because we've looked at the average cost is what we should charge our customers. Why would we? Because we can't do real-time pricing. So if we had real-time pricing, we wouldn't be discussing whether or not we should give, you know, a different value credit, because it wouldn't be flat. But because it's too complex to do real-time pricing for customers, we do have a flat price for generation. So why, from a customer's point of view, looking at this rate, should I be charged generation at one price during the same hour that I'm credited a different price?
So right now, the solar net metering credit is not a flat rate. It's an average of
Correct.
prices between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m.
Yeah.
So
And I
it's
think we
averaged
should
during
walk
the
away
day
from that.
hours. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that the solar net metering rate is not currently expense-based at all. The exports are credited at the retail rate. That is the only rate class that gets that type of treatment.
Up
Where,
to the monthly consumption.
where the light plant is actually buying kilowatt hours from the solar customers at the retail rate.
Yeah.
So that is not expense-based.
Well, the light plant is buying them at the retail rate, but they're also charging a distribution fee, a fixed distribution
Well,
fee.
not currently.
Yes, currently they're
Only for
charged.
commercial customers, not for residential customers.
All right,
Resident-
so our current, if we're good, I'm trying to focus our discussions looking forward to time of use. If we want to rehash everything about our history with time of use, we can, but it's going to muddy the discussion that we're trying to accomplish. The reason is our history with net metering. We have, in past cost of service studies, been pointed out that we're treating customers differently. We're treating commercial customers and residential customers differently under our current net metering rates, because they're different. They're very different. In fact, our commercial rate is closer to where I feel we should go with our time of use than our current residential. Residents get the full value credit during those hours up to their total consumption for the month, and then they get an energy only credit. In our commercial rate, they get to net meter, but they pay the distribution fee, the variable distribution, as they net meter. So those are very different rates, and the time of use should be treated more like the commercial net metering rate we have today, because what it does is it says, if you net meter, we'll give you a credit, but not for distribution.
I mean, that's what you're proposing. We understand that. And the reason we're talking about the past is because your questions were asking why things the way they are.
Yeah, well, I wanted to focus our discussions on the concept of crediting the price that we're charging minus the distribution for the time of use, and whether or not that was a good method for the new time of use rate, such that we can incorporate net metering into this time of use rate. Because otherwise we have to do a tariff system, and that is, again, another special rate for a special device, you know, being solar this time, instead of ETS or being hot water heaters or other things. And we're trying to simplify our rate structure and make it expense-based, but expense-based, not real-time market, but this time of use structure, this 3-tiered time of use structure.
So one of the big topics that the board will need to determine before the cost of service study, which, by the way, we're currently targeting for Q4 work to happen on that for a 2024 rollout, is whether the board wants to do a cost of service study based on embedded cost or long-run marginal cost.
Can you explain the difference?
Probably not as well as an expert, but I can try. So embedded cost looks backwards and says, look, here's what I'm paying for each contract, right? In my system that I negotiated and contracted on a firm basis for. So here's what I paid in 2022, and they'll do some adjustments for market expectations of market price changes in 2023. But basically, they do their allocations and their cost of service study based on the historical cost. The long run marginal cost says, look, as the market is changing in the future, what are the costs going to look like? And then allocating based on those costs.
Okay, so the embedded cost sounds, I'm going to just regurgitate to see if I understand this. So the embedded costs are looking at our actual, what we've paid in the past and determining rates for the next coming year based on that. And then the long run marginal cost is looking at the markets for an estimate of what we should do based on other people's future predictions of the market.
Well,
But
it can-
actually, is it based on our actuals? Because we have long-term contracts, right? So it's a projection based on our known rates. Is that true, Laura?
no, it's more based on the future expectation, but it doesn't have to be based on bilateral, market trading, Brian. It can also be done on an IRP basis where you actually build up the cost of generation from the ground up. And you base your costs on that. So it doesn't have to be what you view as, tenuous market prices. It can be based on actual projections of cost for new generation.
Well, to give you my thoughts on your question, I would lean towards embedded cost because I can understand it.
Yeah, so embedded cost is the more traditional way of doing things, and it's what most utilities use. But
Okay.
more progressive utilities that are facing some of these changes in load more quickly than others are going to the long run marginal cost. So for example, Hawaii, California, North Carolina have all, I believe, at least run long run marginal cost studies at the same time that they looked at embedded costs. So they're comparing the two of those. And when we look at consultants that are going to help us with our cost of service study, I'm making sure that we look at people who have the capacity to do both of those things.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, so from an operational standpoint, whatever the board comes up with, I'd ask that they not vote it as a tariff until we pilot it and test it in the system, because it is something that's completely new. And we want to make sure that, what the desires are can actually be met and tested. So, when you guys come up with your final, this is what we want to do, I would want to get a, handful of customers and test it out. And then once we have the results of that, then, either modify the tariff or adopt it.
Okay. Definitely. I don't think we should theorize something and then force a rollout and make errors. Alice.
So I think, I think that's actually right. But what I'm mostly concerned about is, not mostly concerned, but equally, is looking at what is the cost impact on our customer. That if we could model the cost difference between embedded cost and a marginal incremental cost based on future changes, that to me would be a valuable. If we're talking about only a marginal change in the individual bill, maybe this conversation is more esoteric and ethereal than it is structurally important to the consumer. I get it on a concept level, but we will be spending a great deal of time looking at this time of use rate. We should make sure that the customer value is equally demanding this depth of conversation rather than being a philosophical discussion that we think we want to go in the right direction. If there's no cost benefit or cost deterrent to a customer.
I want to ask Laura, does that like double the consultant's work to do both methods?
I don't know for sure if that's going to double the cost. It clearly would be additional work to run both studies, so I would imagine that the cost of doing that would be higher. I don't know if it would be double.
Is it worth it to you to do that we do that? It seems like we're looking at a very detailed opportunity to change our rate structure.
Right.
It would be good to know whether that detailed study will have a tangible payback to customers on their bill, or are we talking just about a marginal increase on the bill?
I don't think
So
it's gonna
it's,
change our expenses at all. I don't think it's gonna change our rates. I think it's gonna change how we allocate the
right.
the costs. That's what it's gonna change.
Right, they both will sum up to the same revenue requirement.
Right.
But one's more future focused, right? So in this changing market, there's a lot of value in considering it. So it's worth understanding. And I don't know what the cost is for the consultant, but
Yeah.
we should explore it, I think, for sure.
I mean, one possibility is instead of just asking for them to prepare two, is asking them to explain it in more detail up front.
Yeah.
Exactly what it would be, and then the board can decide, you know,
Understand.
that might make more sense.
Yeah.
I get that.
Warren, you had your hand up for a
I
second.
had my hand up and then Laura just spoke and that made perfect sense, so I had nothing to add.
Okay. Pamela, I'm gonna hold off on your question for just a moment. I want to go back to my agenda. To receive feedback on the proposed credit structure for electrical supply for customers under the new time of use. So I think we've gotten some feedback. Allison, Wendy, the original question of crediting customers based on the hourly rate in the time of use minus the distribution. What is your gut feeling about that?
I don't want to give a gut. No, I really need to understand it in more depth and having it presented now. I have a strong, I know you have a very strong opinion.
Yeah.
But I don't have that strong opinion, so I'm not up to the
Yeah,
level that you are in understanding this marginal change in our rate structure for it.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the devil's in the detail, but the concept
Yeah.
of crediting distribution because there's less, I understand and is supportive of, but I think it's,
Sorry, Wendy,
Don't-
not crediting distribution. So
yeah,
that
that's what I
they
meant, sorry.
pay. Okay, yeah. Warren,
Yeah, I mean, I assume that if we went to this system for crediting solar, linking it to time of use rates, folks who have solar will not be getting as large credits as they get now, and their compensation will be less. Is that correct?
it depends on, so our current net metering, if you have, let's say a southeast facing array and most of your production happens in the morning and it's scaled to never net export over the month, you're going to see your credit value go down. If you have an array facing the other direction to the west, you could see your credit value go up. And the reason is not only there's the concept of our current residential net metering gives you 1-for-1 value for the retail rate during the month. And if you don't exceed your consumption, then you're probably going to see your credit go down, because if you're a large producer and you're doing a lot of exports and you're producing more
Right.
later in the day, you might see credits go up. It's value to the light plant based on the time, the structure we're charging.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one thing that seems desirable about that, even though some folks would get lower credits than they get now, is it would give a market signal to additional folks who are installing solar that it's desirable to site the solar in a way that they maximize production during peak times.
Correct. And it would encourage energy storage, because I apologize, this should have been earlier in the conversation, but in the description of this topic, we also have to talk about energy storage. So someone under the time of use rate structure could charge up their battery in the night or the evening and then discharge
arbitrage.
back into the grid. So they would get a credit of the net to them would be the peak expenses. But they're putting up the capital, put their battery in their home. So, and we're getting the benefit of our substation seeing a lower load. I don't think those finances work out for the individual today, but if our peak expenses go up, that may be of value. But the idea is, if our time of use rate reflects our expenses in a way that the customer can understand, and then we give them credits based on sending power accordingly without distribution, so we can keep operating. I think that's a fair structure. Laura, you got another.
No, I just was gonna say, in order to make traction on this agenda topic, Brian, I think it would be very helpful to have written down somewhere. It says, the purpose is to receive board feedback on a proposed
Yes,
credit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Credit.
Okay.
exactly. Thank you. That was succinct.
that's the devil in the detail piece.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Okay. Yeah, we can have it written down somewhere. I will provide something before this comes back on as the agenda, but I wanted to get the opinion of board members so that we could focus these discussions in the future. So that was the purpose of today, was just a general discussion about thoughts. All right. Wendy, do you want to share any closing thoughts? Because this is your last meeting and you've got
No.
6 years here.
No, no. You still have other agenda topics, so I'll let you go.
All
Keep
right.
going.
All right. So we are going to move on to the next agenda topic, which is the follow-up on the load control credit value. Laura or Dave, do you want Laura to take this, or do you want to take it?
Yeah, Laura can take it. Do you want me to share my screen, Laura, with the?
Yeah, that would be great, Dave. Thank you.
Okay, hold on a second.
Great.
Oops. You guys see that?
Oh, yeah, it's plenty big. So at the last meeting, there was a request to understand the bill impacts of making a number of changes. Prior to the ETS discussion, the board had a discussion on heat pumps and what would be the effect on heat pump customers from a cost perspective of eliminating the heat pump rate and shifting those customers over to the time of use rate. And if you recall, I did a comprehensive study of what the bill impacts would be for each one of the heat pump customers using a test year. And in general, the customers would be slightly advantaged by moving off the heat pump rate and over to the time of use rate, primarily because a lot of their use, not a lot, but a majority of their usage or a predominant amount of their usage did occur at night, which is at a cheaper rate than during the day. It was minimal. It was, half a penny to a penny, and there were a few dollars in either direction. The worst off customer spent $9 in season by doing the switch. Based on those,
Sorry, Alice, do you mind muting real quick?
based on those minimal impacts, the board decided that for rate simplicity, it would be a good idea to eliminate the heat pump rate, that special R7 rate, which I know will delight the customer service department because it's a hassle to bill that way. And shifting them over to the time of use rate. So the next question was, well, another special rate we have is ETS. And if we were to shift those customers from the ETS rate as it currently stands to the time of use rate, what would their bill impacts be? And so what I did was, it would be very simple to just compare what the current ETS rate is against the off-peak portion or the off-peak price for the time of use rate. But ETS customers have a very unique load profile. They do use most of their energy during just the hours between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. But they get an afternoon boost in the winter of between 1 and 4 hours based on the outside temperature. So if it's very cold, the temperature is less than 10 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning, we will turn them on for 4 hours. We choose the hours based on our expectation of which will be the least costly, because we'll be buying those in the spot market. It's typically in the afternoon, sometime between 12 and 4, that we run the boost. And most of the time, the boost is 2 hours between 12 and 2. So I went back, I couldn't do all 110 ETS customers because it just would have taken too long, but I took, how many did I take, Dave? It says below 20 or,
Yeah. I
Funny.
don't remember the exact sample off the top of my head, but
it's just down below in there. Yeah.
Yeah,
20. Okay, so
it's
for
20.
customers, I ran their actual hourly usage over the winter and calculated how much did those afternoon boost hours tend to add to the cost of for the ETS customer. And what we discovered was that the additional daytime hours added between an 0.8 of a cent to 1.35 cents to the price. And it tended to be smaller ETS users that saw the higher end. So what I did is I just said, okay, the average for the group is 90 points or 0.9 of a cent. So I'm going to assume, if you go to the next page, Dave, that I'm going to add 90 points to the off-peak rate to say that's what ETS customers would pay if they were to be switched to the time of use rate. That works out to be 14.395 cents. And you compare that to their current rate of 7.815 cents. And they would be seeing an increase of 6.58 cents per kilowatt hour, which is about a doubling of their cost. Now, I did a comprehensive view of all 110 ETS customers, and their winter time usage ranges between 1,000 kilowatt hours and 50,000 kilowatt hours. So the dollar impact to this group ranges from just $45 to the winter to $3,278 for the highest users. That was how much their heating bill would increase for a winter season. And Brian had asked what the total dollar amounts was. And
Yeah, so you had a list at the bottom, and I just want to know what the sum of that list was.
and I did calculate that. I don't know where I put it.
But it is logical that it was a 50% subsidy in a cost of service study. And the fact that it would be 100% increase from the 7.8 cents to the 14.3, that's tracking.
Don't refer to it as a 50% subsidy, please, because I don't feel that that is accurate.
Well, that was what it was referred to in the former cost of service study, not the Baker Tilly, but the other one, the 2015. That's
a long time ago, Brian.
Yeah.
True, but it did come to that conclusion that it was other ratepayers paying that 50%.
Yeah, I don't personally look at the 2015 study. The most recent one we have is the 2019 study. I'm sorry, Brian, I have to go search for this because I had it open and I must have closed it. But I will, if you continue on the conversation, I will come up with the number. You don't have to wait for me.
Yeah, I don't know, but we're going to talk about the credit and we needed more analysis. And I think you're the only one who could really provide that.
Can you say that again, Brian? Brian, can you say again what you said? I didn't quite catch it.
Oh, the agenda topic is analysis. We had already had a discussion about the credit for load control, and you were going to give us more specifics about the load control.
Okay, so are we leaving the rate impacts of the ETS rate? What-
No,
what is the conclusion?
The agenda topic was to talk about the load control credit value.
So before we get to the load control credit value, as a follow-up item to the prior board meeting, staff was asked to prepare a study investigating the dollar impact of customers of eliminating the ETS rate and moving them to time of use. That is what Dave and I are presenting to you right now.
Okay, I remember a request to give a dollar value to the average cost of energy versus the real-time pricing that ETS can provide as some way to give us analysis on a dollar value that we could apply to a load control credit, which is what the agenda was going to follow up on.
That's the next agenda topic. Are we moving off of this agenda topic, this memo that's in front of you?
The memo is about the rate impact to ETS in transitioning from one to the other, which I don't believe was a direct agenda topic.
Dave, would you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I mean, what we put together is what I thought was requested at the last meeting. So if we can finish this, then we can move on to the load credit, Brian.
Sure. But I do want to know that total to finish up this memo. I do want to know what this total is, because that is an important value. I mean, I tried copying from the PDF this list and putting it in Excel to try to sum it up, but it didn't lay out correctly. Yeah, Wendy?
I just had a question. There's a lot of numbers here, so, and this isn't a criticism, but Lori, you used a sample of 20 customers, but we have 110, and there's a pretty broad range in the kilowatt usage of these 110 customers. So I'm just wondering if the analysis you did is a good representation of the impact.
No, that's a really good
Here.
question. So what I did, Wendy, is I looked at all 110 customers,
Yeah.
load usage, and I created 5 groups. And I pulled 4 representative customers from each group. And by 5 groups, I mean by groups of volume.
Okay,
So I
Okay.
tried to get a distribution of the total set.
okay.
I'm sorry, I'm having these computer problems, trying to locate this. It's not that complicated. Maybe what I can do is, just pull them off of the Word document. Yeah, I'm gonna just do that. Okay. So, Brian, the answer to your question is, what is the total of all of these individual bill impacts? And it's $136,741.
Sorry, that number again, 130.
136,741.
All right, so $136,000.
Yes.
That's a pretty big impact in either direction. So we argue about net metering, but net metering is about 50,000. This is a big impact on ratepayers. And the fact that the ETS has not paid distribution means that other customers are paying that portion of distribution for that consumption.
So this may bring us to your next topic, Brian, but I don't, you always couch this topic as it's been subsidized in the past. Whereas when you talk about solar, you don't talk about the
Right.
subsidy they're receiving. for
Well,
paying the
well,
retail.
solar, I don't feel is a subsidy. I think
I know,
solar is
but
overcharged, so
be
that's not
fair-
a subsidy.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's all in the eye of the viewer. So, to be fair, what you're looking at here is, switching them to the
You
time
can
of
see your
use.
chat there with Jason's, just letting you know.
Yeah.
Oh, to the webcam. So is my microphone not working well?
No,
Yeah,
you-
it's a little. I have to keep changing volumes depending on who's talking, so
What
Yeah.
can I do to make it better?
we'll get it squared away after the meeting.
So, what we were talking about is switching the ETS customers to the time of use rate may
Right.
not be a good proxy for their actual cost to the system, because the off-peak rate that currently exists is from, 10 PM to noon. Right? And these
Yeah.
guys generally run from 10 PM to 6 AM, or they
Well,
have that 2-hour boost, but a lot of their usage is off peak, so switching them to the time of use may not be the best proxy for what their actual cost to the system is.
but also we're looking forward at time of use. We're not looking at our existing TOU rate. So there'll be a difference there. So
So I think we're getting back to the main question, Brian, which is, right now, we do have a discontinuity between our rates and our rate philosophy, particularly between ETS and solar and other additive technologies. Where in the past, okay, the board has said, look, if a customer's paying distribution and contributing toward cares and salaries and other light plan expenses through their residential meter, should they pay all those same charges for their incremental usage, whether that's ETS or electric vehicles?
and our rates show that we do that differently based on different technologies. And our point with going to time of use is trying to get everybody treated in the same manner. I mean, if someone uses electricity at night to charge their EV, are we going to give them the ETS rate? Laura?
I'm done,
Yeah.
Ron. If you will not let me complete my sentences, this is not a productive conversation.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I just feel like we're disjointed here because I put on the agenda that we were going to talk about the load control value, and the memo does not reflect that. So I'm at a loss on where we are with this conversation.
Well, as we said, the load control conversation will happen subsequent to the conclusion of this one. And rather than having wasted the last 15 minutes, I'd love the board to get to a place where we could summarize what we decided about this topic that's in front of us right now.
Right. But
And I was trying to point out when you interrupted me, and I started my sentence off by saying, currently our rates are disjointed. We're not treating customers the same.
correct.
ETS customers, it has been assumed that that secondary meter would not contribute toward overhead costs like salaries and cares. Whereas for heat pumps and electric vehicles, the rate was structured that additional usage would contribute to those. So I think the board needs to decide which way it's going to go. We need to treat everybody the same. Our secondary additive uses to the system going to receive, a lower rate than what customers pay for their regular household usage, because they are helping the system by adding kWh, which reduces overall costs for everyone. So, the question is, which way does the board want to go? And I think that would be a helpful conversation to have, Brian, because as you said, the rates aren't currently treated the same, and we really should.
I have a question follow-up. So if additional kilowatt hour sales for ETS, how does that help other ratepayers when the price they're charged is, as it's just recently become equivalent to the generation cost. How are they lowering rates for others?
Well, currently they do pay some towards distribution, which is a small amount, but it does add to the total. And the other thing is they're being charged the flat energy rate when their energy usage is not flat.
You mean they're charged a flat rate when the real-time pricing is not flat?
Correct.
Okay, but we contract for 80% of our energy. Why should the ETS customers be counted as fully in that 20% that's based on the market, not on our contracts?
Everybody is viewed that way, Brian, and particularly additive sales are viewed that way.
Can you explain that? I don't agree.
It's
I don't understand.
Getting back to the question of embedded cost versus long run marginal cost. You're gonna look forward or you're gonna look back.
Yeah. So the average cost of energy is what other customers are paying during those hours. So yeah, you understand my arguments about how we're treating customers, how ETS is being considered as the marginal, and yet everybody else has to pay the average cost. So
No, I'm not treating anybody differently. Every rate class I view as marginal.
how can that be? How can you view all of them as marginal?
Because the cost to serve the next kilowatt hour, as we add more EVs, as we add more heat pumps, okay, the price to serve those customers is what the current market is. I haven't bought for those uses, okay? I have to buy for the next use.
How does that get reflected in all the rates then? If everyone
Well,
is,
when we go to
viewed
time
as
of use,
marginal.
the idea would be that we would price energy, right, according to its actual use each hour.
well, that was what we had requested at the other meeting, was to put values behind that discussion. What is the difference between the average and the marginal? And that was what we were hoping to discuss today. So I don't think we can continue the discussion without that analysis, because that was.
I
what
don't
we're
know which
trying to-
analysis you mean. You're gonna have to be more specific, please.
Well, what is the marginal? So the argument is that by controlling ETS to only operate during those evening hours and a few hours during when the temperature changes and we do a little bump during midday, how much money is ETS paying on the marginal generation price versus the average price in the rate? So if our average generation cost is 8 cents, and at that hour in the middle of the night generation costs 6 cents, then the answer would be 2. That's the analysis we asked for. Your memo is not on the agenda because it talks about what is the rate impact of going to full time of use for ETS. So it's not what we asked for. So it's a good memo. I don't want to discount it. It's good analysis. It's good to know. But the topic was going to be about the valuing of this load control credit based on our discussions last time. And we
Brian, I
couldn't
think
complete them.
records, the minutes will show that Alice requested bill impacts, and Alice is not bill. Okay, so please, and this will, if we can do what Wendy suggested, which is recap at the end of each meeting, you know, exactly what we're talking about and put it down in writing. That was requested, and the analysis in front of you before we get to load control was what we were responding to, and that's it.
Good.
So if you want to wrap up
I
that.
can send you the video clip and show you where that was requested.
It was my request.
Okay, I know, but there might have been more than one request, but that that wasn't what I had put on the agenda to talk about. So
So I think, Brian, I think as chair, you can coordinate that with Dave in advance of the agendas each week, each month. So let's just take that action going forward. I think Laura did what Alice asked for. So
And I
can we
appreciate it.
summarize this particular analysis? I see what you did, Laura. I understand it. Appreciate the explanation of the 20. Clearly, there's an impact just
Mhm.
based on these assumptions. So it's a fact. There's an impact. We have to be cautious. So now maybe we should move on to the next agenda. If
well,
we can, I don't know.
I don't think we can, Wendy.
Yeah, I don't think so. That's where I was going next, right? Okay.
So we already knew that the impact to ETS customers transitioning from their existing rate to the time of use rate was going to be a rate shock. It was going to be a large impact. And, you know, we knew that there was some transition plan was going to be needed. This memo clarifies the scale of that transition, and we can work accordingly with that. Any final comments on this agenda topic? I don't see any. So I know Hal has a public comment that he would like to make. And Hal, are you here?
I am. I am, Brian. Thank you. I've had a hard time following the discussion. It's mainly my computer. Just the sound hasn't been very good. So I hope my comments are on point. From following previous discussion, it seems pretty clear that high volume customers other than ETS are unfairly subsidizing lower volume neighbors, including ETS, because those other high volume customers see their home meter turn for all of their usage. So they are paying an unfair share of distribution in particular. I'm not sure I understand what would compel the board to move ETS into the group of high volume customers who are being unfairly charged for distribution, especially when it's only for the duration of the transition to a what we hope will be an objectively fair time of use rate. And concerning our actual cost of service, since we charge only during some of the available off-peak hours, and they are the least expensive off-peak hours, seems possible to me that the ETS R3 rate is closer to our actual cost of service than the current residential off-peak tour is. And eliminating the ETS rate could result in overbilling for our actual cost of service by a multiple of the supposed subsidy that we receive. So it'd be like fixing a 1 penny problem with a 6 penny solution. I think the ETS R3 subsidy rationale is a bit misconstrued, at least in my mind, and is more accurately described as the corrective to historical rate structure that has routinely overcharged high volume customers by billing for distribution per kilowatt hour. So in my opinion, the ETS rate should not be eliminated until a time of use rate is in place that can bill ETS more fairly for actual cost incurred. And until then, ETS may be advantaged, but according to Baker Tilly, that might be a very slight advantage. And moving ETS to the available R1 tour with its distribution charges is a blunt tool that would overcorrect the problem. I can't speak for the entire ETS community, but I think that there will be a general acceptance of an accurate and fair time of use rate when that arrives. In the meantime, moving ETS to a one-size-fits-all residential tour that dramatically raises our costs the way Laura's memo implies, perhaps only to see those costs go down again when a fixed rate for distribution and a fair tour arrives, will be a tough sell as either accurate or fair, especially in the context of the way ETS was once promoted. Those are my comments.
Great. And Hal, I want to clarify that we would not change the structure of the ETS rate until we rolled out time of use. And the expectation is some kind of transition would happen for ETS customers. So it would
In the meantime, there would be a transition.
no, in the meantime, status quo in the meantime. So until we roll out time of use, we wouldn't be changing the structure of the ETS rate.
All right, thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Mark.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for taking my comment. A few things. One of the specific to the last agenda item, I think that the question still on the table is that needs to be answered is what is the actual value of dispatchable load? And I would encourage you to return to that question at some point, because clearly the ability to control when these high volume customers do demand electricity and hopefully match that to the economics in an advantageous way for the light plant has some value. I think the real question is, is it possible to determine that? And it brings up for me that the idea that, it's not going to be possible to avoid those first principles discussions that have been held many times over the year about, what is a fixed cost, what are the variable costs, and how do those get applied? So if we want to consider distribution, for example, a fixed cost, then how much of that is in the meter versus how much of that is baked into the kilowatt hour rates across the board. And I would encourage thinking that goes along the lines of building those things up from a base case. To that end, as soon as the capability to deploy smart meters becomes available, it should be done specifically so that data can begin to be gathered. And I would encourage the creation of sample model customer profiles that indicate certain categories of customers. For example, there could be a basic, which is assumed to be going to time of use only, might represent a legacy electric user that hasn't adopted an EV, doesn't have electric-based HVAC, and is kind of your traditional old school user. What does their load really look like? How accurate are those load profiles, and can we come up with a model? And then maybe something else which is along a strategic electrification customer who has adopted EVs or might be using heat pumps, and what do their load profiles look like? And then finally, some of these special cases like the solar generators or the ETS customers. And then applying, taking a proposed time of use regime and applying that across the board to all of these profiles so that they can be developed. The other advantage of beginning to collect data is that once the data is available, that data can be retroactively applied to load that existed in the past, and one can actually understand what it would have done to billing compared to the actual billing in the past, again, based on collecting the data and really applying real world experience or real world cases to that data. So I would really encourage that. to the point about, is it too soon to discuss this? I'm afraid not. You know, the meters are coming. These are complicated issues and they take an extraordinary amount of time, and I'm, you know, endlessly grateful for you guys to take it on because it is difficult. But I would encourage partitioning the problem in the way that I was suggesting, so that you know, individual elements can be looked at in isolation, but also so that these maybe model profiles and usage, you know, and load profiles can be applied to them, so that the answer can pop out time and time after again, which is, what is the result of making this change, and how does it impact across various customers? Because unfortunately, with the transition that's going on, you know, your basic customer is going to be affected in one way, where your strategic electric customer is going to be affected in another. And those are always going to be in tension with each other, and, you know, at least in my view. Thanks for taking my comment. And I'm afraid I'm also have a 9 o'clock, so if I don't listen to the other comments, it's not because I don't want to hear them. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Mark. Pamela.
13 Concord Green, Pamela. Thank you guys so much. You're all aiming at trying to make this the fairest thing for all of us that you can possibly do. And it's very hard because I think we need to spend some time talking about what the future looks like that we want to get to, because whatever we set in terms of rates is going to incentivize some kind of future. And when we're trying to make it fair for individual customers, we sometimes make it less likely to achieve the goal for all of us. Because all of the externalized costs, like the cost to everybody of spending a lot of energy during peak, isn't distributed. And excuse me. So we need to set what the future looks like. And it seems to me the future looks like a brilliant thing that Laura and Brian explained to me years ago when I first started to get into this. Brian explained, oh, the costs of electricity change during the time of the day that we use it and during the year. And I hadn't known that. And so if we can lower the cost of the amount of electricity we buy during the peak hours, we save money for everybody. So our rates need to incentivize everybody to do that. And then I said, I started coming to the light plant meetings, and I said to David, great. So the future, we want to have all solar generated here in Concord for all of our energy. If we can get everybody to put solar in, we can generate all the energy we ever use. And no, we can't. And Laura explained to me that Pamela, to install solar would cost, and she told me, some number of millions of dollars. And I said, well, yes, but every residential installation of solar is a part of that the light plant doesn't have to make. So we should incentivize our residents to do that part of that investment for us. What we definitely shouldn't do is disincentivize the installation of solar, because the amount of money that you have to buy is more expensive than the amount of money you get by putting solar back. In other words, set our goals first, then our rate systems will work better, because we have to do the rate systems as a system, not as a bunch of individual additional credits. That's setups.
All right, thank you, Pamela. Wendy,
Brian, I had like two thoughts, and one of them is completely random, but one was a question I forgot to ask Dave about. So Dave, I know that we're putting an insert in the bills around the AMS. Are we soliciting customers who might want to participate in the pilot as part of that process? And I mean, to Mark's point, it would be great to start getting a good representation of those clients.
Yeah, that's the plan. We haven't done that.
Okay. Okay. All right, that's great. And then I guess the second thing that I wanted to just say, Brian, was more going back to our fixed cost discussion as I'm thinking about all these rate topics. You know, we talked about what should be in it. I think the board also needs to decide, you know, there's been a discussion around, are we going to ultimately cover 100% of our costs through a fixed rate? I think that's just another discussion that needs to be further discussed. Like, how far are we going to go, right? Because maybe for right now or for the next couple of years, we're just going to say it'll be 50% of it. I don't know. It's just having that benchmark actually would be an important decision because it weighs into everything else. And that's it. So thank
well,
you.
those are wonderful final comments. As a board member, I want to make sure to thank Wendy for her 6
thank you.
years on this board and coming to an extra meeting after town meeting.
No problem. Appreciate it. No, it's
Yeah.
always good discussion. You'll see me in the future.
I'm
Eventually.
sure we will. Is there
All right.
any other public comments? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn from Wendy.
So moved.
Do I have a second? I have a second from Alice. All right, Wendy,
Approve.
Warren,
Approve.
Alice. And I agree as well. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.
Have a good morning.
Bye.